Hi kids! Every year I teach Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It's a wonderful timepiece of love and manners and food. There are lots of balls and parties, and at every ball, white soup is served. In fact, Mr. Bingley assures that they will have a ball at Netherfield just as soon as his servant can whip up enough white soup. So that is what I will attempt to do for you today. I did quite a bit of research on the internet, and wow, pretty much this is a very rich broth. I don't have any knuckles of mutton lying around, but from the comments I read, chicken broth works just as well. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you are encouraged to make your own version of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice white soup. Here we go. Chicken broth and cream are essential to this soup. Now let's pan out and see what other ingredients and supplies we will need. You will need a large pot, a stirring spoon, a colander to screen out the pieces of chicken. Hopefully we won't need the sieve to get smaller pieces out of the soup, but if we do, here it is. So those are essential. The recipe calls for rice, and here's my switch out. I prefer this orzo pasta because it won't turn to gum in the bottom of your soup bowl. This is a very nice pasta, and I prefer that to the rice. Okay, we have heavy cream. We have broth. We'll need to dice up an onion. We'll need some herbs. Now, just a little hint. I like to buy some of my herbs in bulk. This is sage. I just wanted you to see what large leaves those are. This is a very pungent, strong herb. You don't need a whole lot of that. Also some rosemary, which looks like little pine needles. I'll be grinding both of those in the spice grinder here. Or, of course, you're free to get your own rosemary and sage, but I would still encourage you to put that through the spice grinder. Always, no one likes to have little needles in their food. Recipes also suggest a little basil for sweetness, and there's some more sage. And I will be enhancing the flavor of our broth with, I have some chicken bones that I cut the meat from the chicken, and I always freeze those for just this purpose of making stock. But don't worry, if you don't have any bones to boil up, some chicken broth cubes will work just fine. Of course, we have salt and pepper, and even, hello, white pepper, okay, to keep with the theme of our white soup. I'll explain those eggs in a minute. Also, the authentic recipe calls for sugared sliced almonds. I'll not be using this simply because I don't like crunchy things in my soup, but you're welcome to coat those with butter, sprinkle them with some sugar, and toast them either in a pan for a couple minutes or in the oven. So that's the authentic soup. Also, 2 or 3 eggs, and since I'm making such a large quantity, each one of these holds 4 cups, and I'll probably be using 2 cups of cream. So I've got 18 cups of soup already. About 3 eggs. Just, you can add more, or I think 3 will do nicely here. The purpose of the egg is to create a creamy, silky texture, and we won't add those until later. All right, let's get this simmering. Cream goes in last. Let's boil up our broth and our onion. So, well, here we go. Here's a safety tip. Anytime anything in the kitchen, any food is round, cut it in half so that you don't cut yourself. I'm not a fancy chopper. I just don't like to get cut. So we're going to give it a cut this way. And I think that's it. I'm not going to fine chop it by going both ways because remember, we have to strain this out of the soup anyway. So let me just give this all a rough chop and throw that in the pot. There you have it. Just the onions and the broth and chicken bones. I'm going to let this go probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now, you do not want to boil this. I mean, you can bring it to a boil first, and then you want to turn it down so that it simmers. You do not want too much moisture escaping. You don't want all of your broth evaporating. So once this comes to a boil, I am going to put a cover on it. Just let it simmer, an hour, hour and a half, and then check on it. I wish you could smell this. It smells delicious. By the way, we're not going to add our herbs yet until the end because herbs, they can cook out. So really the only thing that's needed is a little bit of salt. But we're going to hold off on our spices till later. Okay? Okay, this has been going an hour and a half, and I think this is long enough. The onions are pretty much dissolved. Now I want you to notice this little bit of fat right here. We can just skim that off. In fact, that's what I'm going to do and put it in the bowl over here. We're going to add so much cream to this soup that we're not going to need that kind of fat. So I do encourage you to skim that off the top. Next step, we're almost done. I let the broth cool a little bit because, well, I've gotten burned a lot over my lifetime of cooking here. So we're going to now strain that. And I already took out all the large pieces because that would just be too messy to clean out of there. Okay, we can pour it in the other pot and then we'll put it back on the stove to cook our pasta. Doesn't matter which pot you put it in now. Next, if you see any more pieces of things you would like to remove, just take your sieve here and scoop them out. And I found a couple little fragments I didn't want in my soup. And then I just splatter them over there and that takes care of it. Now we're ready to boil up our pasta. Time for pasta. Add about a teaspoon for each serving you're making. Wait for it to boil and 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be a hard boil, just a little simmer going on. Now we'll dump in our sage and rosemary. I feel like that is even too much. I'm only going to put half of that. You can always take it out. You can't take it out. Also at this point, since it cooled off, taste it. I added a couple bouillon cubes because I felt it wasn't quite salty enough. Of course, the cream is going to cut a lot of that salt. And also at this point, we'll add a little bit of white pepper. Okay, soup's on. Time to check the pasta. Just because it says on the box it's ready in 10 minutes doesn't mean that's always so. It's been 10 minutes, but I don't feel this is quite done yet. Always check your food. You can even let that cool and taste it. It may not be soft enough yet, so I'm going to let this go just a little bit longer. Meanwhile, I have broken down the egg, so I'm going to use my fancy little, what's that called? I'll think of it later. A whisk, that's what that is. And have you heard of tempering? This is a really neat thing to keep the egg from cooking in the pot because the water is boiling. You just take a little bit of hot broth and you pour just a little bit in there. You let it get used to the change in temperature. Oh, it's so hard doing one-handed. I need a tripod. Then you just whisk that together and the egg remains happy. There you go. Now, have you ever had egg drop soup, say at a Chinese restaurant? That is a result of the white part of the egg. So we don't want stringy egg pieces in our soup. We just want the creaminess from it. What I do with my ladle, here's my ladle. So you repeat this process of getting it used to the heat, and that's why it's called tempering. Just pour a little bit more in there. There you go. Happy eggs. Keep going. I gotta stir. There. Okay. Okay, you just continue this process until the eggs remain happy, not clumpy. And really the yolks don't clump the way that the whites of the eggs would clump. So I'm going to do this till this bowl is about half full, and then I'm going to dump it back in the soup. But I'm just going to let that pasta go 5 more minutes before I finish that out. And then the cream. Okay, look at our pasta now. See how much fuller and plump that is? That's done now. And our tempered eggs. Go. See, no clumping, no stringiness. Okay, we're done. We can cut the heat. We no longer need to cook anything. Everything is cooked. I'm going to wait till it stops boiling. When it stops boiling, I will put in the rest of the egg mixture. The eggs are incorporated. I went ahead and took my sieve and got out some of the large pieces of sage. Our flavor is already in there. Just wanted it a little more refined without those coarse pieces. Okay, as far as how much cream, at this point, if you're on a diet, I suggest you eat the soup now. Otherwise, the rest of us will be enjoying cream. You should serve it, and then you should serve it immediately because the cream will cool down the soup. I recommend a quarter to a third of your soup. So, just start pouring it in when it gets that nice creamy color to it. That's probably enough. So, again, I'm going to put about 2-3 cups of cream in there. And then we get to taste it. Oh my goodness, is this delicious. I already had a bowl. This one's the prop. I think I'm going to eat this one too. The depth of flavor from all that chicken and the herbs, this has several notes to it, and the creaminess is out of this world from the egg and the cream. It is absolutely delicious. It really wasn't that hard to make. As you see, it just takes time. I think a lot of cooking involves staying home. So take up your spoon and say with me, as my ship sails away out to sea, I scoop my soup away from me. Enjoy. Thanks for watching Cooking with Mrs. B.